but it was very hard to become enchanted when everyone's having sex all the time. What's up book nerds, I'm Lucky's Universe and today we are doing my month in books, aka what I read in June. This month I got through 4 books, which is actually a pretty good achievement for me. And I'm gonna go through them with you today. There will be no spoilers in this, but if you want a bit more of an in-depth analysis of the books that I read, you can check out my Goodreads, which I'll link down below, and it has all of my ratings and all of my reviews for these books. And my tea is almost at perfect drinking temperature, so let's get into it. I lied, it's hot, it's hot, it's hot. The first book I read in the month of June was The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. This was lent to me by a friend, and if you want the full in-depth discussion of this book, you can go check out my reading vlog that I did of The Night Circus. I'll link it up here. The Night Circus is a young adult fantasy that follows the story of a girl named Celia and a boy named Marco who have been trained by 2 different magicians to compete in a game for which the arena is this mysterious magical circus. Throughout the book, no one knows what this game is or how you're supposed to play or how you even win the game. And along the way, we get introduced to some really interesting characters. I rated this book 5 stars because I just genuinely loved this book. I found that this book, the writing was very emotive without becoming superfluous or too much, so you didn't ever feel like you were like wading through mountains of words to get to the point of the story. I thought the characters were really cool. The whole book had like a really enchanting fairy tale vibe, and I think that's why I loved it so much. But yeah, if you love magic and fairy tales, this is definitely a book for you. The next book I read, continuing my Erin Morgenstern spree, was The Starless Sea. The Starless Sea is another fantasy novel, and it's about a guy named Zachary Rollins, who is a game design or game theory university student who loves to read, and he finds a book that mysteriously has some stories from his past written into it. So he follows his curiosity and discovers the existence of this underground labyrinth library place called the Starless Sea. He meets some intriguing characters, and it's basically just like one big adventure book, and I loved it. I rated this book 4 stars. It would have gotten 5 if I hadn't just come off from reading The Night Circus. Like, The Night Circus was a 5-star book. Was this a great book? Yes. Did it beat The Night Circus? No. In saying that, I still really love this book, although I feel if you don't have a good grasp on like literary techniques like metaphors and imagery and that sort of thing, some of the stuff in this book might go over your head. Or if you're someone who likes things to be fully and properly explained, again, might not be your kind of book. When you read this, you really have to pay attention because it can be quite confusing, because the point of the story is like the metaphors and the imagery and everything not quite being explained. Things kind of cross over, there's lots of different stories. It's literally, there's stories within stories about stories within stories, and it can get very tricky if you're not paying attention. Plus, if you're looking for a book with good LGBTQ+ representation, highly recommend. This was one of the first books that I came across where the LGBTQ character was the main character, like the protagonist, not just a side character with no storyline. Just in general, a fantasy book that features the protagonist as an LGBTQ+ character. So yeah, 4 stars, lots of things happening, very interesting, 10 out of 10 would recommend. The next book I read was The Beauty of the Wolf by Ray Delaney. I was kind of excited to read this book. It's got an average 4.5-star rating on Goodreads, but I don't really trust Goodreads ratings anymore. One, like the cover's just really pretty, but also it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling. And I'm always a simp for a good fairy tale retelling, but they're very hard to do right. And this book sort of did it. The story is about a fairy boy named Beau who was kind of created by this evil sorceress to murder his father because he wronged her in some way. And he, Beau, the boy, falls in love with a kind of monster girl named Rhonda. There's lots of magic and curses and things happening, but I rated this book 3 stars because I just couldn't get into the story. The first part of the book is so slow paced, I almost gave up. It's told in a very fairy tale-like fashion, but because the chapters are so short and they switch very frequently between a lot of different characters, it was almost impossible to get attached to any of the characters or to fully immerse yourself in the fictional world. However, I really like the themes that this book explores. I liked what this book was trying to say about the nature of sex and gender and love. And it just has a lot of important messages, which is why I kind of enjoyed it, but just from a story point of view, I didn't really like it. Also with this book, there is a lot of sex and a lot of sexual, intimate language, which is another reason why it was hard to view this as a fairy tale, because the reason why I like fairy tale retellings or books that have a fairy tale kind of feel to them is because it's very easy to become enchanted and swept away, and it's so lovely. But it was very hard to become enchanted when everyone's having sex all the time. Okay, now it's safe to drink. Now it's safe to drink. And finally, we have The Diabolic by S.J. Kincaid. Kincaid? I don't really know how to pronounce the last name. Someone please tell me in the comments. This was a book that my friend loaned me, and to be honest, although I try to go into books with an open mind and not judge it based on the genre or the cover or previous books, sometimes I do, and I was fully expecting to not love this book because it's like a sci-fi dystopian novel, which are like my two least favorite genres smushed into one. And to be honest, the first 100 pages, I wasn't impressed. The Diabolic is about a girl, or sort of a genetically engineered human named Nemesis, who was created to protect a girl named Sidonia. But there was a great purge of Diabolics because Diabolics are genetically engineered to be faster and stronger, and the higher-ups began to fear them, fear that they would overpower them, so they decreed that all Diabolics be killed. However, the family really wanted to keep Nemesis, so they faked her death so no one knows that she exists. Because Sidonia's father has kind of ticked off the Emperor of Space, whatever the world is called, the Emperor summons Sidonia to the space court to be like a hostage, I guess. Family obviously doesn't want to do that, so they disguise Nemesis as Sidonia and send her in her place. And while Nemesis is there, she has to try and navigate all of the tricky court politics and try and act as human as she can, and so she has to come to terms with her own creation, what parts of her are human, what parts are not. And of course there's a little bit of romance thrown in there too, just for laughs. I thought that it was kind of slow paced at the start. Also, the world building was very confusing, hard to get a grasp on. And as someone who's not, I don't really mind that much about world building. I'm more like characters, then plot, then world building. I don't mind that as much. So it was just a really confusing blend. But I think if you're someone who's into world building, you'd probably think that was okay. So yeah, if you like world building, you'll probably like it. Like I said at the start, I totally was not expecting to enjoy this book. I don't like dystopian, I don't like sci-fi. Just my opinion, everyone's different. However, after the first 100 pages, once I started to sort of grasp the world and what was going on, I actually really enjoyed it. I thought the writing was good. I really liked Nemesis, I found her extremely relatable. I don't know what that says about me as a person, that I relate to a genetically engineered emotionless robot. And after the first 100 pages, the pacing picked up and I thought the story carried along really well. I rated it 4 stars on Goodreads, I think, because I did really enjoy it. I am a bit apprehensive about this because it was originally intended as a standalone, but I just found out that because of its popularity, the author decided to turn it into a trilogy. And I am debating whether or not to read the rest of the books, because usually, in my experience, when a book was intended as a standalone or was intended as only this amount of books, and then because of popularity, the author decides to write more, usually the following books just aren't as good. And I went and read the blurbs for both the second and the third book because I'm trash, and I can't say that I was happy with the way that this story is panning out. So I'm tossing up on whether to read the rest of the series and see where it goes, or just be happy in blissful ignorance and enjoy this book as a standalone. So that concludes my month in books. If you have any good books that you'd like me to read, leave a comment because I'm always happy to get recommendations. Remember to like, subscribe, and share this video. If you don't already follow me on TikTok, go check that out. I post some pretty cool stuff on there. I will also leave a link to my Twitter and my Goodreads account below. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you later.